Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We have a lot of people registered for today's webinar and more people on their way, so we'll welcome them as they come in. This is authentic and dynamic assessments for service learning. If everybody could just let me know through the chat box that they are able to hear some audio, that would be awesome. All right, perfect. And hopefully anybody who can't hear us notices your chat through the side there. Happy to see some familiar names as well. Just to go over our goals, today we're going to be talking, really want you to understand the different types of formative and summative assessments that can be used in service learning. And we really want to build and utilize a quality rubric to increase youth voice and choice. And like all of our webinars, we don't see this as we are presenters and you are participants. We are all facilitators in this, and we have a lot of people on the webinar that have far more experience with this than us, and so we want to make sure that everybody is sharing their ideas and their experience with assessment, and that we're really creating a community of learners. So please speak up through the chat box. Share your ideas and get involved, and then there'll be some opportunities to continue this conversation afterwards as well. So if everybody could start those introductions by introducing yourself through the chat box, share your name, your organization or school that you represent, the location where you're at, and your role. We have Lauren. Hi, Lauren, from Westridge School for Girls in Pasadena, California, Middle and Upper School Service Learning Coordinator. Megan from Planned Parenthood of the Great Northwest, Seattle, Washington, Teen Outreach Program Trainer. Mary Alvarez, Napa, California. I wish I was there with you right now. On the Move Leadership Academy Coach. Karen from University of Southern California. This is where it gets tricky because the chat box goes crazy. Deborah from Wilmington University, Newcastle, Delaware program. Sarah, Agnes Irwin School, Rosemont, Pennsylvania, Community Service Organizer. Steve, Kids Miracle Making Club from New York. Jean from the Sheboygan Leadership Academy in Wisconsin. Megan Niebler, Planned Parenthood of the Great Northwest. Paul Bowers, Northern Oklahoma College. Leslie Fox teaches Spanish and service learning for an online school, Arizona Virtual Academy. Welcome. Lacey Morgan from Planned Parenthood of the Great Northwest. Anna, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Manager of Diversity. Katie Hutchinson, Walsh University, North Canton. Kristen from Partnership Rapid City. Samantha from On the Move in Napa. Let's see, Mary from Highland Community School in Highland, Wisconsin. Julie also from Highland Community School. Judy from the Network for Dissemination of Curriculum and Fusion at Northeastern Illinois, University of Chicago. Lori from Queens, New York, the High School of Arts and Business. Beth, Director of Center for Community Engaged Learning. Abby, Highland Middle School Instructor, and Pam, University of Nebraska at Omaha. Awesome. We have a wide diversity of different levels of education as well, and hopefully we'll encourage people as they join us to introduce themselves. Welcome, everybody. Again, everybody is a facilitator. We're all sharing ideas, and we'll continue to share ideas together. So, to introduce ourselves, I'm going to let Elizabeth introduce herself.
Hi, I am Elizabeth Koenig. I work at NYLC as a Professional Development Manager.
And my name is Lana Peterson. I am also a Professional Development Manager. And with us in the room, we have Marcus Penny. He is helping us as a producer, so if you do have any questions for the group or technical questions, please send them to Marcus, and he can help you out. Or if you missed any of the files or want to follow up, I want to welcome in Rebecca to Church of the Open Door, Service Learning Associate. Welcome. Just to let you know, we're the National Youth Leadership Council. Some of you are probably very familiar. Just to introduce us, we have three main buckets of work. The first on the far left is represented, we develop young leaders. That's where we started off 30 years ago with our National Youth Leadership Training, an experiential education-based program that really got young people talking about the differences in their community and how to break down racial barriers that they were experiencing. And we were sending these young people back into their community who were very engaged, ready to make change, but we realized the adults that work with them weren't ready for them, weren't ready for young people that were ready to be agents of change. And so we started doing service learning training with adults as well. And so we do that, both of those trainings, through a lot of our district-wide work, teen driver safety programs, mentorship programs, the Generator School Network. And then our last bucket of work is advancing the field, and we do that through a lot of policy and advocacy work, as well as the National Service Learning Conference, which is coming up in a month in Washington, D.C. So if you don't have plans to go yet, check out servicelearningconference.org, and I'm sure by the many speakers such as Sandra Day O'Connor, Arnie Duncan, Philippe Cousteau, your mind will be changed.
So I want to start out our time today by talking about the definition of service learning. There are, I think, over 180 definitions of service learning, and I want to share NYLC's definition of how we define service learning so that we're kind of all on the same page moving forward. So service learning is an approach to teaching and learning in which students use academic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. There's a couple things I want to point out in this definition that is important to our discussion today. And first, that this is approach to teaching and to learning. So this is really a collaboration between students and teachers. And in talking today, we'll talk about how students and teachers are involved in the development of the rubrics and assessments so that everyone's on the same page about the learning goals that are happening in the classroom. And then second, we want to talk about how it's academic knowledge and skills. So this is really putting learning at the forefront and making sure that we are meeting those learning goals and those academic goals that you have set out in front of you. And we do that, that's why we're talking about assessment today, to make sure that we have hit those. So I quick want to run through how NYLC develops service learning experiences. I'm guessing many of you are familiar with the backwards design process, and if not, we'll give you a quick overview, and then we'll go back to really talking about assessment. So first, we identify those desired results. So what are those learning goals that, or what do you really want students to be able to know and do by the end of the experience? These are concepts, themes, issues, debatable topics. And then next is determining acceptable evidence. So this is where we're going to talk a lot today, and this is how are you going to make sure that the students are learning what you set out for them to learn, and what sort of activities both during and at the end of the project are going to show that. Then the third step of the process is planning those learning experiences. That's the IPARD cycle. So IPARD is what service learning, or what NYLC uses to do service learning for students, and that's investigate, plan, act, reflect, and demonstrate. That's the student experience in this process. And then finally is the self-assessment. So that's, we'll have the students be reflecting as part of this service learning process, and then we want to make sure that the instructors at the end assess the work that happened and what went well, what didn't go well, and make sure to document what happened so that it can be recreated with students in the future. So we're going to touch back on determining acceptable evidence and developing those assessments to go along with it.
And I just want to say, feel free to send any questions that you have through the chat box at any time. We will take a few pauses to ask more as a group, and we'll have some activities as well. I also want to welcome Maria as well from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. But just to get us started thinking about service learning and how to integrate or use assessments within a service learning project, really before you start, obviously, sharing the content standards and the desired learning outcomes with the young people so that they know what's expected of them, posting and review the questions that they will explore during the service learning project, and then elicit students' help in listing the important knowledge and skills students will learn during their project. At the beginning of the project, talk with the students about the type of assessments they'll participate in to show evidence of learning and understanding by the end of the project. What products, performances, and other evidence are you going to assess? what parts of their work will be assessed. Maybe it's something individual, or maybe they'll be evaluated as a group. Share the culminating performance task and accompanying rubric so that students will know what's expected of them and how they will be judged. And whenever possible, show examples of student work on similar tasks so that students can see what quality really looks like. And then after they've done the main part of their project or their service, explicitly connect the learning experiences and direct instruction during the service learning project with the desired results, essential questions, and expected performances. And have the students regularly reflect on what they are learning and how it'll help them in their tasks in service learning project as well in other areas of their life and with school. So really, the way that we start developing what our assessments are, we have to go back to that stage one. So what did you define as the instructor, as the adult, as the mentor? We're going to be those desired results. And so obviously if you are in an academic-based area, those are content standards or things that your department has outlined for the students. And then you're really going to have to unpack those outcomes to think about what knowledge, skills, and understandings will the students need to have in order to meet those results. And combining those outcomes, the learning targets, with the knowledge, skills, and understandings become your learning targets. And so keeping those in mind, that is how you develop your formative and summative assessment. Those assessments should directly reflect what you're looking for the students to create. And so oftentimes in service learning, we see the mistake of people jumping to the activity, jumping to the service itself. And through that, students do learn, but it's not necessarily what you intended them to learn. So we need to start with those learning outcomes because we understand as adults and as young people, we are accountable for our students reaching those outcomes as well. So we encourage people to start with them and to build the assessments off of your desired results. So we're going to take a break for a second and ask for you to tell us, how do you typically assess student learning? Are there formative or daily activities that you have students do, possibly either in person or online, to check for understanding? Do you have a project that you maybe do year after year? Do you typically do maybe exhibitions or have a lot of presentations? What is your style as an instructor? And can you share any of that through the chat box with the rest of them? And also, how are you what are you looking to grow in as well? So we'll wait to see some of the responses through the chat box. So Lauren shares contributions to online class discussion board, reflection papers, and final presentations. I am an online student myself, and so I definitely know the importance of having authentic online discussion. Individual weekly assignments that lead up to collaborative portfolio and a presentation. Yes, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Journals and class discussions for formative assessment and portfolios for summative. And Deborah, can I ask you a follow-up question? Do they share their journals with the rest of the class or with you? Does anybody see their what they share? Rebecca, processing and debriefing as a group, individually after each experience. So yep, that informal checking for understanding. Karen integrates community partner feedback. That's awesome. And assessments to make sure that the project is understood by the partner and met their needs. Absolutely. High school students, final group team presentation with their project managers. And Anna, maybe you can share whether you assess as a whole group or individuals, individual grades or both. Deborah, journals are only shared with me unless they choose to share information from their journal in class discussion. Awesome. Beth, midterm and final exhibitions for day students, meta-journal weekly as a formative assessment and discussion in seminar debriefing among the group and peer assessments. So you have lots of different layers. Anna, medical students have reflection points 3 times a year. Assess as a whole group. One of the learning goals is leadership development and teamwork. That's final electronic portfolio with the program-wide outcomes matched with evidence deliverables connected to outcomes. Mary shares student presentation, reflection papers, portfolios, journals, weekly assignments, quizzes, tests, discussions, both group and individual assessment, and peer evaluation. I'm working as an online student, like I said, and one of the best but most challenging experiences thus far is that sometimes you always have that peer that isn't as engaged in the project, but my instructors have a rule that you cannot just do the project yourself. I just think, oh, it'd be so much easier if I could do the project myself, but that's one of the rules, is that you can't break off. So I'm learning to work with people that I've never met in person, and it's a great activity together. Leslie shares that she meets with her students live in session 3 times per week and lead a group investigation and conversation on current issues. Students' conversations are monitored and assessed with a participation rubric. I'd love if you'd be willing to share that with us, Leslie. They build their projects and create PowerPoints to share with class. They're sent with our student body and announcements as PSAs. Medical students also do poster presentation at association conferences and on campus. Mid-program review in a 3-year bachelor degree program provided quantitative and qualitative assessments connected to learning outcomes, and students have to explain why they have or have not reached competency for learning goal or outcome. Beth, thank you. You touched on the self-evaluation, which is really important. Keep them coming. I'm going to keep it going and touch on some of the things that we talked about today. So we really see the different types of assessment really on a spectrum from informal to more formal. So we've heard a couple today with the teacher observations, the questions, having discussions as a group, some whiteboard responses. Sometimes these aren't always planned, but more informal, as you know, master teachers do check for understanding. Typically, these things often aren't scored, but just for a teacher to know whether they need to change what they're doing in their instruction to ensure understanding. Then we have the selected response. So discrete bits of information, facts, concepts, or skills. Usually there is some sort of correct answer, so this may be a quick quiz that you do to see, maybe it's a pre-test for you to know where your students are at. And then you move to the constructive response, which is really where we see students start to move into the critical thinking. It really requires more than a yes or no answer or multiple choice. They have to justify their thinking on this so that you can really see the process and how they reach this point. And because there is no right or wrong answer, you know, rubrics are one of the best ways to assess in this situation. And then you have your authentic assessments, which is your final cumulative projects. In service learning, this often is the service itself. It is that final project that the students have been planning, preparing for. And maybe the assessment isn't the service itself, but the demonstration afterwards. But as you can see from the description, it really is aligned a lot with service learning because it provides the real-world context for them to apply the skills that they've learned and the knowledge that they've learned in a real situation, and so that they know that their learning is not within isolation. And like some of the descriptions that you've shared already in the chat box, you see it in the examples as well for the authentic assessments.
So we want to go through a couple different types of assessment tasks today. A lot of them were mentioned in the chat box during our discussion earlier, so we kind of want to touch on them and explain them more deeply and their connections to service learning, as well as give you guys some examples of what they look like in practice in a service learning project. So we're going to start out talking about portfolios, and a lot of you mentioned what portfolios, that you use portfolios as an assessment task in your work. And so portfolio is really a collection of student work that is selected to show their achievement and progress over time. So you can use both working portfolios, which include drafts and revisions and final versions of work and writing samples, photographs, videos, artwork, but you can also have assessment portfolios, which is the work is selected to best demonstrate the achievement of instructional goals, and students and teachers work on that together to make sure what's included in the portfolio best meets the previous established criteria. that was done in the classroom. So advantages of portfolio specifically tied to service learning is that it documents actual student performance. Service learning really is a process that has multiple steps, so this really shows the growth of the student over time. It enhances student self-direction and shows how all the work that they are doing fits together, and it also allows you to share student learning with the community, whether that's people inside your building, parents, other students, or also community members. So an example of what this looks like with a service learning project is a science class where students are participating in a service learning project to improve the ecological health of a local park, specifically the balance of native versus invasive species. So students investigated the native species and non-native species, developed an action or plan for taking action, worked with experts to create a guide for their plan, including photos and descriptions, and suggestions for removal. And then students then presented their plan to local park officials. So the final assessment of this work was this portfolio, and there were the work from every phase of the cycle was represented in the portfolio. And when I say cycle, I mean the IPRIDE cycle, the investigate, plan, act, reflect, and demonstrate. So their inquiry activities, like their data collection and a summary of their findings, and their self-assessment of a discussion they had about plans for the parks was shared. Their action plan and their tree identification guide was shared in their portfolio, and then the student presentations of their service learning project to the park official was also part of this larger portfolio.
And I just sent through a link. We created a Google Doc of both some of the project examples we'll be talking about today, as well as some additional resources that we found really helpful. And we didn't want to just send you through a ton of documents and to just be saving them one after another. And so we created this Google Doc, and we would say add to the Google Doc, absolutely. If there's anything that you want to share as well, I'm going to share later how to go on the GSN. You will see that the gsn.nylc.org is it's a free online community, so in order to see those project examples, you are going to have to create a profile or go back onto the profile that you may already have. And then if there's anything shared through here, we'll keep collecting everything. We didn't want to turn it into a PDF, and we'll send both a recording of this webinar as well as a place you can find all of these projects in an email to you all tomorrow as well, so you can get a copy of the slideshow as well. And I will say through our research, portfolios is one of the most often used in higher ed as well, because you have students who are doing service learning projects in many different courses. And so some universities are now offering a service learning certificate that students can add onto their graduation. We know some high schools are doing this as well. And so in order to really not just count hours, because we don't want to just count hours for service learning experiences, we want them to really reflect upon them. So really to share what they're doing as a whole, throughout their whole process as a student, they're creating these portfolios. I know as an undergrad in elementary ed, I also created an online portfolio to share that I was meeting the standards for teacher education as well too. So, question, do you know any online tools that allow students to create digital portfolios in lieu of tangible portfolios? I do, Lauren. I have another webinar on online tools for service learning. I'm going to follow up with that. Gosh, what is it called? It's a place to collect all of these places. Maybe Marcus, can you look up what I shared for portfolios on that? I will follow up with that, I promise you. I can't think of the name of it right now. There's so many online tools, but I will follow up. If anybody else knows of one too, I know we have some online high school people or online school teachers. Think of it as well. I am going to move on as I think of that, but I promise I think of it. Another example of assessment task is exhibitions. And when we say exhibitions, we're not just talking about your traditional trifold board that you see on the computer right now, but also performances, presentations, student-led events all go into this as well. It's a great opportunity to use multiple assessment methods because you're taking both the content knowledge that's based off the performance as well as a post-exhibition self-report that allows students to explain how their thinking has changed throughout the process. And then the advantages are that students can help plan and establish the criteria, so they'll have not only voice in their project, but as well as what they're going to be assessed on. Allow students to share information with others and really be respected as that, wow, look, that person has a lot of knowledge and they're really going to share that knowledge with us. And involve others in student assessment, such as peer assessment, as we talked about being evaluated by a group, evaluated by local experts, and then self-assessment as well. And then I want to share an example. Both Elizabeth and I had the opportunity last year, and we'll do it again this year, to be a judge as a part of World Savvy's competition. And so I'm going to share with you, hopefully on the screen you should be seeing the rubric that teacher used. It's one of the tabs up at the top. So we came in as judges. This was in middle school, and they had all of their exhibits, kind of a poster session, and we went through and we scored them, and we talked to them, and we asked them to give an explanation of their project, and we were the judges. So it's a great way to get community members involved. It highered the expectations for the students because not only were they talking to their peers or their teachers, but now they had outside community members that they were presenting to. It was really fun and interesting for us. I will say that the students could choose to either do a trifold board or they could create a website as well. So it was interesting to see the difference in tasks within that. And so this was a rubric, and again, this is shared through the Google Doc as well, so if you want to access this again, this was one of Gina Nelson. And then we also did a blog about it as well through nylc.org. Maybe Marcus could share that, World Savvy blog. And so project-based learning, one of the main components of project-based learning is that exhibition. So this, is a core component of that, and service learning is one opportunity to either serve the community or demonstrate that new understanding.
So the next example of assessment tasks that we're going to talk about is the oral assessment. And there's a couple different ways that this can look, and we're going to run through a few of those. First is the questioning, and this is important with service learning because it allows teachers to really gain insights into student understanding and reasoning. And it's also important that teachers encourage students to develop deeper conceptual knowledge, explore public problems, question assumptions, evaluate evidence, and think critically about problem solutions. So on your screen, you'll see a chart of different sample questions of how you can really dig deeper and assess what students are learning and how they're thinking. This is really important in service learning because it makes sure that students are digging below the surface level of community problems to take a look at those root causes and then develop those creative solutions. So another example of oral assessments would be the discussion, and really this allows students to defend viewpoints with evidence and disagree respectfully, which I think are really important things that students develop, important skills that students develop in service learning. So an example of what this could look like is a simulated town hall meeting where students are assigned roles of particular stakeholders on the issue, and then they prepare for the meeting by conducting research on the issue and on their position. And then finally, I wanted to share an example that comes from Edison High School in Northeast Minneapolis about their oral assessments and what they did. So they developed a project around the issue of poverty by creating digital stories about its effects in their own community. And their teacher created, they worked with their teacher to create this service learning project so the students would learn about the issue, create a short film, and share their films with civic leaders who can take steps to address the poverty in their community. And you'll see links to this project, both to a blog post that was done about it as well as the videos, and that's part of that Google Doc that we shared earlier.
And then I'm going to share about examples for assessment with writing. And, writing is such a core component of all education and really very applicable to what they'll, be doing in the job field, but writing really helps teachers assess the accuracy and depth of student understanding of facts, concepts, and relationships, and where they need to reteach or offer additional instruction. One way that you see this is learning logs or the reflection journals that we talked about earlier through the chat box, brief informal writing assignments in which summarizes learning experiences, and like, I forget who shared the journals, looking back up here, but, oh, Deborah. You know, that could also be a private thing, so people can be really honest because they know that nobody's going to be able to see this, so maybe they feel less judged by those informal pieces, and also can go in the direction that meets their needs. Written reflection allows students to step outside of an experience and really think from an outsider on what just kind of happened to them. And so one opportunity that you'll see through the Google Doc is building healthy relationships to build healthy lives, as well as building healthy relationships through improved interpersonal communication. Two separate projects, but you'll see that what they're really focusing on is the role that conflict and violence played in their lives, and comparing what they have a lot of both interpersonal as well as outside conflict with, and comparing that to the characters in this novel breathing underwater. And so they were able to really share both a real-life example as well as compare that with the character to relate with the character and better understand the book. And then they did a service project based on violence within their community and conflict resolution. And so great, authentic way, very based in the content standards and what those students needed to know, and allowed them to connect it to the world.
So this is one last example of assessment tasks and specifically tied to service learning. So this comes, this is a visual representation of concepts, terms, and ideas. This is a graphic organizer, and it's really useful for expressing the understanding of relationships. So this specific graphic organizer comes from a project on the Generator School Network called Creature Comforts. It's a high school project focused on Earth and environmental and biology. And the students, the goals of this project were that students would behave as citizen scientists, collecting and analyzing environmental data and to assess change over time, and that they would understand how humans can positively and negatively impact the environment and the organisms that live within it. So this graphic organizer was really used as a formative assessment throughout the project to make sure that students were making those connections before they moved on to the bigger plans for the project, which included developing brochures about the benefits of animals that control insect and pest populations, and that really goes to that interconnectedness that is shown on the graphic organizer.
So before we jump into rubrics, I just want to stop and take note of what's happening in the chat box right now. We kind of have a lively discussion happening. So I want to touch on, go all the way back that Lori talked about students are assessed by their youth advisors on a monthly basis using an internship performance evaluation. Lori, if you can expand on that, that sounds amazing, and what an awesome real-world skill that could definitely be applied to the workforce, and letting those students assess each other and being able to give constructive feedback to your peers. Anything that you can share about that, that sounds awesome. We shared the Google Doc. Maria talked about, in order to enhance the service learning experience, we offer interdisciplinary professional development, such as cultural competency, working with social worker with an opportunity to reflect on their service project. This is achieved via seminars offered through the academic year. I appreciate how you're setting your students up for success and thinking holistically about what they'll need to succeed. And then I'm going to find that online portfolio, whether I have to respond in that afterwards in an email, but it's bothering me. I can't think of it. Leslie shared some prezzies that she's been working on and how you can use that as an online portfolio as well. And Leslie shared questions asked about online portfolios. She's sharing those, and we'll add those to the Google Doc too, or you can add those as well. And I'll share a little bit later. If there is any other questions, please send them through. I'm going to move into the section where we talk about rubrics, starting off with why for rubrics, but really the number one reason is because rubrics provide clear expectations for what our young people, what our students, what our adult learners will be assessed on, and they really support educators in assessing not just the content knowledge, but the skills and the application of that knowledge of the project. Rubrics are represented as a scale of achievement, so it's not a right or wrong, and it allows for students to have continual growth. And one of the biggest questions we get on service learning is how to incorporate youth voice while still meeting academic content standards. So an educator stating their expectations can allow a young person to see what their teacher wants out of them, but have control over how they're going to prove that they've mastered this subject to their teachers. And so we have a couple examples up here at the top in the tabs, which I believe that you can click on, and they're also uploaded into that Google Doc as well. So this is an example from our service learning self-assessment that you can find on the Generator School Network. At the top, it's a little bit different than maybe a traditional rubric just for space, but at the top is really that standard, and then your criteria is listed along the top with the scale, and then you see along the side what we're looking for. And this is a tool that we use with instructors and young people if they want to really bring their service learning to quality using the K-12 service learning standards for quality practice. And then I will share another one. We have lots of different rubrics that we can share on for service learning projects, but really you see the quality or the criteria along the side. And so that's really based and totally connected to the content skills and character civic knowledge that you want your students to have. So maybe that's writing mechanics. Maybe it's eye contact. If they're doing a presentation, working as a group, maybe it's group work. There's different ways that you can go about doing it. So in the example that you see right here, this is really an analytic rubric, not a holistic. So an analytic means that maybe your student gets 5 points on initiative and productivity, but they're not very good working with a team, so they only get 3 there. So they're not just going to get this giant score, A, that doesn't really tell you, or 99 out of 100, that doesn't necessarily tell you what they did well and what they didn't. And so this allows the teacher or the instructor to analyze them specifically on that criteria. And then the descriptions that you see there need to be very clear. You want criteria that are linked to learning targets, but of course you don't want too much criteria, so you have to be really critical about, as an instructor, what you're going to integrate into the rubric. And note that this criteria could be weighed differently, so maybe, let's see, reflection is weighed a little bit less than the ability to articulate knowledge, and you can share that weight with your students as well. And then when you're creating the descriptions in the middle for what a number 4 looks like, make sure that you're writing it in language that your students can understand with them so that they know exactly what you're looking for. And then I'm just going to go back one thing. So in using a rubric, make sure you share, like we said at the beginning, the rubric at the very beginning, and accompany the rubric with the best example that you can find. This example may even be a professional example of this. And even if you think, wow, that's probably way different than what my students are going to be able to achieve, that's okay. That's okay. You want a professional example because there's always going to be room for growth, both academically as well as professionally. So you want that example to be the cream of the crop. You want to create a rubric for every major product that your students are creating. So maybe they are creating a research paper and there is a rough draft due, on the 1st of the month. That needs a rubric as well as the final draft that you're creating as well. Buck Institute, which I have to give a shout out, is very helpful. If you Buck Institute, I'll share their link later, recommends always beginning your rubric from the exemplar. So always starting with your number 5 and then moving down. always continually revise your rubric as an educator. And we said our fourth step of the service learning process is really self-reflection. And so when you're grading all of those papers or presentations, take a moment with all of your evidence and your artifacts that you have and really group those papers based on maybe the 5s, the 3s, and the 1s, and think about what are you seeing in the 5s, what are you seeing in the 3s. Maybe you have everybody's getting a 5. Why is that? Is your criteria not high enough? Take that time to do a self-reflection, and then judge the product, not the process. If you're judging the process with this rubric, then you're making a lot of assumptions. There's other ways to judge that process, and we do that through more informal settings or other assessments, but if you're creating a rubric for a final product, make sure that you're judging that final product, because you could be making assumptions about your students if you're using any other type of evidence. There should be evidence that goes along with every grade that they get. And so I'm going to share with you an example. This is an example of a student group assessment. You can find this on the GSN. It's also in our link. This is where it looks a little bit different, but you see she has her criteria right here. She has her scale up above. And then you go down, the product, sorry, this isn't all in here, but this is basically for them to self-assess. And I'm not sure why the document isn't working, but here we go. I know, because I'm doing it wrong. Okay, so this is what exceed standard looks like. This is what meet standards looks like. So here's her description. So again, you could put this back in something where they could, where it is more of a box shape, if that's something that you want to do, but you don't have to. So this is another opportunity, as well as doing peer evaluation as well is another opportunity to get that feedback. So if you're looking for information on the process, then you do a peer evaluation of what was it like to work with this person, and use the feedback from that student as your evidence, as your artifact to give them that final grade. Also from Buck Institute is a rubric for rubrics. You know, rubrics is one of the hardest things for educators and instructors to develop, especially a quality rubric. So this is one tool that you can use to help build your rubric as well. And we shared that through the document. There are tools out there that you can use to create rubrics for you, so you don't have to start from scratch. Rubricsforteachers.com, Rubistar, and then Edutopia and BIE also have a lot of great resources to do as well. So I put a lot of links to different articles from Edutopia and different blogs on people's perspective for rubrics, so think about that. And then if everybody could just share one thing from today's webinar as we start to wrap up that you want to implement in your service learning practice. I'm going to just keep that coming through the chat box so we can know how you're going to apply this. And I do want to show you, after we're done, I'm going to show you how that we can share ideas for sharing ideas on the GSN of different assessments, because a lot of you have a lot of great things that you're sharing, and I want to make sure that we document them. Katie shares that she's definitely going to do more rubrics. Hadn't thought of self-assessment, but it makes a lot of sense, and we'll be sure to send through the full document of the service learning self-assessment. Megan's going to integrate community partner feedback and peer evaluation. Deborah is going to do online portfolios and other types of assessment that she hasn't used yet. Karen, talking about leadership development, student assess each other as a team, more connections between service learning and the work experience, absolutely. And there are leadership standards that we can share with you, and civic standards that might be helpful, or 21st century standards that you might want to consider integrating more formally when you're creating those assessments. Let's see, Lauren says going to start integrating online portfolios in some way for students to track their engagement in the community over the course of 1 or more years. Leslie's going to create a section of the online course with examples of cream of the crop for different forms of assessment. Mary's going to integrate student reflection on why he or she has not met the competency for the learning goals or outcomes. Expand assessment types that you're using. Develop rubrics for assessment of group projects is something you'd like to look into, as well as training students in use of rubrics in their group assessments. Absolutely, students can create rubrics too, get them to work. Looking for employable standards, we will send those through. Creating more rubrics and also community involvement in final assessment or final projects. Pam's going to share exploring the resources, to identify new tools for assessment plan. Designing an effective rubric and implementing a variety of student reflection tools. Beginning to develop evaluation of work in local high schools, and think of the rubrics and sharing with them students first would be very valuable. Integrating more personal reflections and team reflections, developing effective and clear rubrics. Use assessment tasks in an exhibition, absolutely. I'm happy to see all of this. I'm going to show you the GSN in 1 second. I just want to see if there's any other pieces coming through. Okay, so I'm sharing my desktop right now. Oh, I was trying to find, this is the Generator School Network. This is our online platform that youth and adults can be engaged in service learning. We just acquired all the K-12 service learning clearinghouse resources as well, so you can find those here at any point. You don't need to sign in. It's a library of resources, and we're working very hard to curate them and get them all tagged. As you can see, this is our webinars along the side. This is what's happening on the GSN. We're going to post a recorded version of this in our Learn section, and some of the questions that you all asked today, there are additional topics on the GSN related to this, so be sure to check out our topics on the GSN. We record all of our webinars for 24-hour viewing, so you can see them. But the other great section that I'd love for you all to check out is the plan section, and these are over 500 user-generated projects that anybody can access. It will ask you to sign in once you get to the plan and connect sections, because that's our member area, and that's where members are sharing the things that they've done in their classrooms, or where students are sharing what they've done in the classrooms. And we want to make sure that everyone's privacy is protected, and so you're going to have to sign in to be a part of that section. But you can search different projects. We have projects from pre-K to higher ed, and I encourage you all to create a new project and share some of the stuff that you're doing today. And in the description somewhere, just do a hashtag and do assessment, so that we know that you are from this webinar, and then we'll culminate all of your projects together, because some of you have some really dynamic ideas and things that you're going to share with us, and we want to make sure that they're really honored and shared with the group. And also the people that weren't able to attend today, maybe they registered but they weren't able to come on. And then you could also just use that same hashtag here. You could just search assessment here if you're looking for their projects as well. So we're going to create a follow-up to this. And this is where we'll house it on the GSN. So the link to this website is gsn.nylc.org. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing that so that you could see this, but it's gsn.nylc.org. That's where we share all of our online content. It's it'll always be free. It's just an online space that we have for people like us to get together and to share all these amazing ideas that you're coming up with today. And so thank you, everybody, for sharing as well. I'm going to post this. These are all of our resources that we have. Everything we do online is free, and we encourage you to join in. The LIFT is a great tool as well if you're looking to learn more about the K-12 Service Learning Standards for Quality Practice. Yeah, so we're going to stay on for a little while if there is any other questions, but thank you so much for joining us. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And please follow up with any additional questions. And Lauren, I promise you I'm going to find that online portfolio as we speak. Thanks, everybody.